Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our first Madison Milwaukee Downtown Exchange for 2025. It's great to see all of you, and thank you, first and foremost, for your support of our two largest downtowns in the state of Wisconsin. As a reminder, this series is all about creating connections and sharing ideas between our two regions so we can work together for greater collaboration, growth, and investment. We are so thankful again this year to partner on the Madison Milwaukee Downtown Exchange with our great friends from Milwaukee Downtown, Bid 21. Just an excellent organization. Thank you so much for all you do for Milwaukee. You're a shining star for us here in Madison. I hope it's the same. I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. We're so excited today. We have a huge topic, a very timely topic. We're going to talk about federal policy and why it's important to downtowns. We have an excellent guest with us today, Andrew Goldberg, who is with the International Downtown Association, heads up all our U.S. government policy. We're going to hear from him. We're going to hear from myself. We're going to hear from Matt Dorner. We're going to hear from Beth Wirk about why downtowns and federal policy are important for each other. I'm going to thank our sponsors. We wouldn't be here without our sponsors. Thank you so much to our series sponsor, the team at Reinhardt, and our supporting sponsors, Bolt and Wipfli. First up, we're going to hear from our good friend to the Madison Milwaukee Downtown Exchange, Mike Brasser, who is the Vice President of National Healthcare at Bolt. Mike, how are you this morning?
I am doing well. Thanks, Jason, and happy Friday to everyone. Really appreciate everyone joining the call. And I guess I didn't even realize it seems like we've been off to a really fast start to 2025. I didn't even realize this was the first one, so this is great. So as Jason mentioned, I'm Mike Brasser with Bolt, and just really appreciate the opportunity today to connect with everyone. For those of you who aren't familiar with Bolt, Bolt is a 135-year-old family and employee-owned construction company here in Wisconsin. We have many offices around the country, but 7 here in Wisconsin specifically, including in both Madison and Milwaukee. And our main focus is helping our clients meet their commercial construction needs, focusing on really all sectors, including education, healthcare, industrial, life science, and energy. So really looking forward to hearing the topic today from Andrew, and looking forward to connecting with you all soon. So thank you very much.
Mike, thank you very much. And thank you for everything the Bolt Company does for both downtowns and for this series. We appreciate it. And to our major series sponsor, our friends at Reinhardt. Jessica Biggett, Associate Attorney in the Real Estate Practice Group, is with us here today. Jessica, good morning. How are you?
Hey, good morning. I'm good. Thank you, Jason. Like Jason said, I'm a real estate attorney over at Reinhardt. I think it's safe to say that Reinhardt really maintains a strong connection with DMI, so we're always happy to sponsor these events. For those of you who aren't familiar with Reinhardt, we're a full service, business-oriented law firm with our two major offices in Milwaukee and in Madison. So these downtown exchanges are really important to us. One, from a business perspective, with, like I said, our two big offices in the two downtowns, but also as people who live and work in the two downtowns. So thank you, Jason, for putting this on and giving us the opportunity to sponsor the event. I'm really excited to listen in today.
Well, thank you, Jessica. Thank you to all Reinhardt does for both of our organizations. Both organizations have board members from Reinhardt on our teams. We cannot thank Debbie and Joya enough. Nathan Wadier, former past chair of our organization, just for years have supported both organizations and supported the downtown. So we cannot thank you enough, Jessica. And thank you again to our friends at Bolt and Whitley. Speaking of partners, we wouldn't be here without Milwaukee Downtown. And we have the dynamic duo with us today. We have Beth Wirk, President and CEO, and Matt Dorner, head of all things economic development, with us this morning. How are you two doing? How's everything in Milwaukee?
Doing great, doing great. Matt and I are sitting across the hall from each other in our messy paper-filled offices, but it's
Well, at
good to
least you made it into the office.
see.
I had a childcare drop off and came home, so I'm on West Side office of downtown Madison Inc. right now.
Yeah,
Yes.
I was just
Yeah.
looking and thinking like, wow, we really are not fully technology based yet, are we? We try, but it's good to see everybody. And thanks to Reinhardt and Bolt and Jason, as always, your energy and all the effort that you put into this is phenomenal. Andrew, so super grateful to you for being here today. And I know Jason and I have been and still involved in the International Downtown Associations, which is a phenomenal organization that represents individuals from downtown organizations globally. And it has been for me at least almost 4 decades of just really meeting and greeting great people, great professional development, great knowledge sharing, advocacy work, which we're going to hear a lot about that today from Andrew, because God, we know how important that is right now as it relates to the impacts it has on our city's infrastructure, our economic stimulus, housing initiatives, and so many other uh, initiatives or efforts or issues that are impacting us all. So I'm sure it's going to be a short talk for Andrew today because there's not much going on. But then also thanks to Reinhardt and Bolt for your support and the fabulous Matt Dorner, who is just amazing and works on all of these initiatives. So thanks for the opportunity to be here with everybody today.
Well, good morning, everybody. Yeah, thank you, Beth, so much. I mean, it's great to be here and really kicking off, I think, the fourth season of the Downtown Exchange. So again, Jason, thank you so much for this partnership and the way that this has grown and so many different topics that are relevant to both of our downtowns that we've been able to touch upon, over the last couple of years. So again, really looking forward to the discussion. Obviously, we know there's a lot of moving targets and a lot of important topics that I think they want to touch upon today. So again, thank you everybody for joining us, and thank you to our sponsors. And again, looking forward to getting into the subject matter. Jason, I'll turn it back over to you.
Well, thank you, Matt. Thank you, Beth, for your partnership. I got to say, the partnership was in full effect this week on Monday. I just took over the Milwaukee downtown office, used their conference room like it was my own. So thank you very much. It was alive and well. I'm thinking about initiating office hours in Milwaukee. Beth thought it was a good idea. We'll see. We'll see if I overstay my welcome. All right. Today we are talking about federal policy in downtowns, a very timely topic. Obviously, a lot has happened in Washington over the last couple of months, and we are honored to have Andrew Goldberg here, who is the principal at Agora, but also heads up all U.S. government relations for the International Downtown Association. Andrew, how are you this morning?
I am doing well. It's a little cold here, but I guess probably warmer than it is where you are. So,
Yeah, okay, let's just dig right into that. What does cold mean for you in Washington,
all
D.C.?
right. So, well, according to my computer, right now it's 28 degrees.
Oh,
So,
okay. Well, according to my computer, it's 10.
oh, okay. So it's a heat wave for you.
No, I'm just kidding. It's all relative. It's all 28 is quite
Exactly.
cold. See. Well, I want to say a huge thank you for joining us. I have the good fortune of serving as the International Downtown Association's U.S. Government Policy Chair this year. And so we're really excited to bring in our good friend, Andrew Goldberg. He's going to give a presentation about what is happening in Washington, what the lay of the land is right now, which is ever changing. And then we've got some questions about why this matters for downtowns across the country, but most importantly, why this matters to Milwaukee and Madison. Andrew, please, the floor is yours.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for having me to both Madison and Milwaukee. It's really great to be here. I really appreciate it. Thanks to Jason and to Beth and Matt and Madeline and everybody who helped set this up. I'll say, as Jason said, he is not only does incredible work for downtown Madison, he's also the chair of IDA's U.S. Advocacy Network and has been a real leader for the last several years in helping us get off the ground and become a stronger voice for downtowns nationwide. Milwaukee is also the work that Beth and Matt do, both not just locally, but nationally with IDA has been terrific. I'll say as a personal note, I have some small connections to Wisconsin. My sister-in-law lives in the Milwaukee area. My nephew goes to school in Madison. It's a small school you probably haven't heard of. It's called University of Wisconsin, I think.
No,
It's a
tell
little.
tell us more. Where is this?
So
Where is
it
this?
has. I guess it's near. It's in Madison somewhere. I don't know. It's a
Oh,
very
got
small
it.
place.
Got it.
Probably never heard of it. But again, it's really great to be here and to share. Try to put in context, what is happening in Washington. I'm going to call if I do have a presentation here that I want to share. let's see here. And I'll start, I'll start by talk a little bit about, IDA. IDA, as I said, is the National Organization for Place Management Organizations, BIDS, however you want to call it, not just the US, but in Canada and around the world. They really work to help build a network and the capacity of bids to make their downtowns more vibrant, more attractive, prosperous, safe, everything. And in the past few years, have really stepped up in terms of advocating at the national level for bids. I will say, and this probably goes without saying, but it's always good to point this out, particularly in a time like this. IDA is a bipartisan organization. We are not Republicans or Democrats. We advocate for what's best for downtowns and for the place management sector. We don't lean one way or the other. We're not afraid to call out or, criticize or praise actions from either side that impact downtowns. Obviously, there's a lot of polarization in the country. Certainly, we want to be above that. I'll tell you that I think any state that sends both Tammy Baldwin and Ron Johnson to the Senate, I think gets the idea of sort of navigating some of the challenges of partisanship. But what I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about what's been going on and set kind of context to talk a bit about what that means for downtowns and what it could mean as we move forward. So first of all, where we're at, obviously not news to anybody. In the election in November, the Republican Party won what we call the trifecta, meaning they control the White House, the House, and the Senate, the policy-making sort of centers of Washington. Obviously, with President Trump winning election or re-election as president, Republicans maintaining control in the House and winning the Senate. It is, however, a somewhat narrow majority. In the Senate, 53 to 47 gives Republicans some cushion to do things, but they certainly are below the 60-seat threshold you need to get over a filibuster in the Senate. So they still, on many issues, would need Democratic support. In the House, it's much closer, 220 to 215, and in fact, right now, because there are at least two vacancies and a third kind of in the offing over the next few months, Republicans are going to have an even narrower majority, essentially a one-seat effective majority for a little while. So that makes it really hard to get things done. If Democrats stay united on opposing Republican plans, Republicans need to keep every member of their caucus together. And as we've seen the past few years, there's not been easy. So they have the majority, the trifecta as we call it, but it is somewhat tenuous. One thing I would note as we talk about partisanship and bipartisanship, it's important to look how things have changed. The Senate has traditionally been, of course, the more stately, bipartisan kind of a body. It's been called the saucer in which the hot tea of the House gets poured to cool down. It's the saying that some people use in Washington, who I guess like to drink tea. But it's to get a sense of where the Senate is, back 30 years ago, if you look, about a third or between a third and half of states had a mixed delegation, meaning one Democrat and one Republican. You can see the ones in purple there. That was 30 years ago in Clinton's time. This year, there are 3 states, including, of course, Wisconsin, that every other state has a essentially unified delegation, all Ds or all Rs. And so that does impact the ability of the parties to get together and work across lines to get things done. So where are we? Republicans gained the majority in the House and the Senate. President Trump inaugurated on January 20th. What's the kind of the reality of the environment? Republicans want to get a lot of things done in Washington, and as we'll talk about, certainly on the executive side, they're doing a lot. We'll talk about that. But in terms of legislation and long-term policy, it's hard. They have, again, a very thin majority in the House. They have the Senate filibuster to deal with in the Senate. That makes it hard. They can avoid a filibuster for doing certain kinds of policy, which I'll talk about. And this is what if you've heard the news about the president and others saying they're going to pass a big, beautiful bill that will deal with tax policy and the border and energy. That they can do with just a simple majority. But even so, it's still not certain that all Republicans, especially in the House, will stick together. So it's going to be a very hard process for them to get things done in Congress. Now, meanwhile, and we'll talk about this, the president has unleashed probably really, I'd say, unprecedented number of executive actions and activities, both for the White House with this DOGE entity that's going to agencies. And it's unclear at this point to what extent the courts may stop some of that if they feel he goes beyond his authority, or whether they'll let him go. So a lot of things are happening. It's not clear how many of them will stick and will actually become policy for the next few years. But the bottom line is, even though the president has a 4-year term, Republicans essentially have 2 years to get things done. At least that's how they feel. And the reason for that is that unified control, that trifecta, never lasts long. If you look at the last 30, 35 years, every president who came into office had started out or had at some point that governing majority where they had not just the White House, but the House and the Senate. And with the exception of the second W. Bush, all of them lost it after 2 years in the midterm election when one or both chambers flipped parties. That happened to Trump back in 2018. The Republicans lost the House, happened to President Biden. And if you go back further, Obama, Clinton. And so it's not certain what will happen in 2026 in the midterm election. But if history is any guide, there's a good chance that Democrats could win back one or maybe both chambers, and that really makes it much harder for Republicans to get policy done. So there's a lot of urgency to get things done in an environment when they don't have a super large majority to actually get things done. Well, that's what's happening sort of on the congressional side, some of the bigger legislation. Obviously, for the last month, and we're only about a month into this administration, we've definitely seen an enormous amount of movement, action, policy changes, policy shifts across pretty much every kind of topic, every area you can imagine federal policy. Some of the ones that impact downtowns the most I'll mention here. A big one, of course, is immigration. And that's been something that has been a top issue of the election, a big issue for President Trump. He promised mass deportations, big changes. You've seen some of that. You've seen ICE going into various cities and doing deportations. I think the numbers are not where President Trump said they would be or wants them to be for various reasons, staffing reasons and somewhat, but I think you're going to see more pressure on that in cities to find undocumented immigrants and remove them. A part of that, and I'll go into more detail in a bit, is targeting sanctuary cities. Those cities or other jurisdictions, maybe statewide, that said we're not going to cooperate with federal immigration officials on undocumented workers. And that's been a big target of the administration to sort of go after those kinds of cities. More broadly on the economy, which is something that affects downtowns, sometimes indirectly, sometimes directly. You've seen some actions by the administration that could have an impact. The tariffs, some of which have moved forward, some of which, like on Canada and Mexico, have been delayed for a little bit. That can certainly have an impact on the economy, potentially on inflation. We've also heard or suspect, based upon what he did in the first term, that President Trump may put more pressure on the Federal Reserve to lower interest rates, which could have an impact as well. Again, not necessarily a direct, immediate impact on downtowns, but anything that impacts the economy, of course, is going to impact that. So we have to watch that very closely. Taxes is going to be a big piece. In 2017, in his first term, President Trump passed a fairly big tax cut bill, did a lot of changes in the tax system, lowered corporate taxes, lowered individual taxes. Some of those expire at the end of this year, including individual tax rates. And so that's going to be a big priority this year, is moving that. The question is, will there be opportunities within that to promote and push tax incentives that help downtowns, particularly help housing, which I think everybody agrees is a big challenge across the country, the lack of affordable housing. And we're working on some issues to try to promote tax policy in that. Public safety, which we know is a big issue, of course, for downtowns, a lot of rhetoric about that, certainly during the campaign and onward. What kind of federal action will happen is a little bit uncertain. As I'll show, the president put out some executive orders trying to kind of get to some of that. It's not clear to what extent At the federal level, we'll see a lot of action on public safety. And last, but certainly not least, and I'd say most of what we're hearing about are sort of the changes in agencies and the spending cuts. Everything from reductions in the federal workforce, various executive orders that have delayed action on various rules or regulations, efforts to try to block federal funding from moving forward, everything like that. What are the impacts of all that? And that really is the big question, because there's so much happening on that area, in that front, happening so quickly. Plus, there are lawsuits, in some cases, trying to stop or temporarily stop these actions. That's really kind of the big core of what we're looking at, is what that impact is. And to jump into that, let's talk about some of those White House actions over the last month. The president's put forward just I'll use a scientific term here, a massive number of executive orders. It's not an official word, but certainly from day one, a ton of them on every issue under the sun, but certainly things that could have some impact one way or the other on downtowns, on the economy, on bids and their members, certainly the ones that address DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, that have terminated all sort of federal programs and policies, gotten rid of staff who do that, but also executive orders that sort of pressure companies and nonprofits into eliminating DEI programs. One of them, for example, calls on agencies to identify a certain number of large nonprofits, companies, institutions like education that are, in their view, engaging in discriminatory DEI for potential action by the Justice Department that could have an impact on the private sector. And you're seeing a lot of companies, a lot of organizations pulling off of their websites some of the language that is considered now verboten, and we're thinking about what that means, but also asking, what does that mean for our contracts, say, with states or with cities that require some affirmative action or other pieces like that. Obviously, the DOGE has now a big piece that's been embedded in pretty much every agency, and going quickly to block funding, to fire staff, even trying to get into some of the computer systems. And again, that's where a lot of the real kind of impactful things are happening, and not all of it entirely clear or open to us, entirely transparent. You're seeing impacts. There was an executive order related to civic architecture, requiring GSA to basically build more classical or traditional type buildings, which again, indirect or long-term downstream impact for cities when you have a federal presence. We're seeing a lot of work on the workforce, ending remote work arrangements, not just those that came out during the pandemic, but even telework policies from before that, requiring workers to come in on a full-time basis. Now, for a city like Washington, where I am right now, that certainly potentially means more people downtown, which probably could help. Other cities, it may have an impact. It also may lead to more workers leaving. Again, of course, immigration, a big topic, more immigration enforcement at the border, involving the military, changing some of the kind of the policies that the Biden administration put forward. And then on public safety, a couple of things that could potentially have sort of an impact downtowns if there are safety issues, certainly designating gangs like MS-13 as terrorist organizations, which kind of provides for more ability for the military to go after them, and certainly increasing federal death penalty, the use of the federal death penalty for crimes, including against law enforcement officers or against undocumented workers. So I would say nothing that directly is targeted like as a laser at downtowns, but certainly things that impact them in a number of different ways. Another big area that we followed is this funding freeze. And so as folks probably know or heard, back in late January, the Office of Management and Budget announced that they were freezing all grants and federal assistance to nonprofits, to states, to companies, not to individuals. This caused obviously a lot of concern. This is trillions of dollars of federal money that had been appropriated by Congress and that people expected. I'll tell you, those days were a little bit chaotic. The next day, first OMB clarified that, well, the freeze is really only on certain activities, funding related to some legislation that passed in the Biden administration, the Inflation Reduction Act, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, plus funding on DEI, climate, sort of other disfavored activities, according to the administration. But that really didn't clarify things because they're still sounding like they were going to review all funding, and unclear how long that would take. Later that day, a judge issued a stay on it. The next day, the OMB rescinded the memo, but then the White House press secretary said, well, the memo was rescinded, but the funding freeze is still on. So a lot of confusion. That weekend, a second federal judge in Rhode Island issued a restraining order on all the freezes for basically blue states that, Democratic-led states that had gone against this. 2 weeks later, the judge put a ruling that said, the White House is still not complying with that. Where we're at right now is that in some cases, funding is back on. Other cases, it's not. And we've heard anecdotally from different groups, nonprofits, states, other entities, that some of the funding is still not moving forward. And it seems that what the administration is doing is they're saying, well, we're going to abide by the restraining order, which says the OMB memo is not inactive, but we're going to find other authorities or other provisions in federal law that will give us the right to then stop that funding. What this is all leading towards potentially is what would be a court case. Under the Constitution, it says that money must be that's appropriated by Congress. It needs to be spent by the executive branch. Back in the 70s, Congress passed in the Nixon era a law called the Budget Impoundment Act, which basically requires the White House executive branch to spend money or disperse money that Congress had provided. President Trump and his supporters say that law was unconstitutional. The other people say, well, no, it's not. The Congress has the power of the purse. Ultimately, this will probably end up in the Supreme Court. The question of to what extent can a White House not spend money that Congress said needs to be spent. And certainly if the courts rule in favor of the administration, that would be a big shift, because then the president has a lot more power to decide, I want to spend money here, but not there. So we're watching that closely, like everybody is, to see kind of where this ends up. But, if we have a situation where the president can just decide unilaterally not to spend money, that's going to be a big change. Another issue quickly I just want to mention, I mentioned before, was sanctuary cities. And soon after she was confirmed as Attorney General, the new Attorney General, Pam Bondi, put out an order that does a couple of things. One, it requires the Department of Justice to evaluate all funding agreements, any kind of grants, contracts with nonprofit organizations that, as they put it, provide support to undocumented people. It doesn't define what support is exactly, to what extent that is, but it requires them to look back and do that. And we believe that grants to certain organizations have been frozen because of that. It also calls on the department to end any funding to any kind of state or locality that basically has a sanctuary city law. And this would be kind of any funding across the board from DOJ only, because it's under DOJ, but we expect this to be expanded to other agencies as well, meaning if you are a sanctuary city, the administration may try to say you can't get any funding for anything. And last, it requires DOJ to pursue enforcement actions or accelerate actions against government jurisdictions that essentially act as sanctuary cities that impede immigration operations. The key question there is, and I don't quite know exactly how like Milwaukee and Madison bids are kind of organized, but in some cases like California, bids are kind of quasi-governmental. And so there's some real questions about whether that means that a bid in some way could potentially be exposed if it does any actions that could be interpreted as supporting or helping in any way, shape, or form undocumented people. So we are looking at all these pieces there, because some of these things could have an impact on downtowns and on bids and on the business community. So what's the bottom line for all this? Like I said, and all these things are happening as we go. It's probably, even since this call started, more news coming out of the White House about various actions. And so we're trying to track all of it. Certainly, we could see spending cuts on a lot of programs that certainly downtowns rely upon, homelessness, public safety grants, things like that. Certainly, this turmoil in agencies, the cuts, the freezes on spending, things like that, could impact grant programs that downtowns, their partners, that all groups rely upon. We could see some potential economic disruptions from the tariffs, potentially if there are wide-scale deportations. Also, the debt ceiling. I didn't mention this, but the federal government's ability to borrow money is going to kind of hit the ceiling, essentially the top, the credit limit in a few months. And Congress needs to extend that. If not, the U.S. would default on its debt, which would have a lot of impacts. With the push to extend and enlarge the Trump tax cuts from 2017, that could make it harder to either get more tax incentives that help downtowns. It could threaten potentially things like the historic tax credit or others. We have to watch that. And beyond that, there's kind of this growing urban-rural divide in the country, and certainly we have to be aware of that. We're getting more of that polarization between urban areas and rural areas. That said, while there's some challenges, there are opportunities. Certainly, tax legislation, it could be beneficial to real estate. And I'll talk more about some of the ways we're trying to make sure that tax policy helps downtowns. Housing, I think everybody agrees, is a priority and a challenge, providing affordable housing, more so workforce housing. And so there could be room to do things there. I think this interest in public safety, concerns about what's happening in cities, could create opportunities to provide more funding for things like burn JAG grants. I know Madison was the recipient of a burn JAG grant, which is a way of public safety support from the government that helps do a whole number of different activities related to public safety. And look, this is a real estate president, right? So we're certainly hopeful in working with our real estate partners to convey the importance of making sure that central business districts, that the commercial real estate sector, those pieces are healthy and thriving, and that becomes a real generator for activity in downtowns. So really quickly, and I want to leave plenty of time for questions. What is IDA doing about that? Well, like I said, the past few years, thanks to Jason's leadership and that of many other members from around the country, but mostly Jason, I just want to say that we've put forward this year a kind of three large areas we're working on legislation beyond dealing with all of the sort of the chaos that's happening and things like that. What we're really pushing for is legislation and policies that really help to continue to help downtowns build economic growth and create jobs. So a big part of that is legislation that we've supported over the past few years called the Revitalizing Downtowns and Main Streets Act that would create tax incentives to convert unused office space into housing and affordable housing. And that's a great way to address two issues, a lack of office space in downtowns, but also the need for housing. We're also working to help organizations like Milwaukee, like the bids, to gain more direct spending grants from Congress. What used to be called earmarks, which had a bad connotation, but it's money that Congress can provide to specific projects in their districts that really help downtowns. Second, we're looking at helping make cities clean and safe for those who use them by increasing funding for grant programs like the Burn JAG program I mentioned that have been really helpful for downtowns. We're looking at legislation that hopefully will be introduced fairly soon that will give grants to cities and others to do more evidence-based, what's called CEPTED, community policing or protection through environmental design projects, as well as looking at legislation that we've supported to increase federal efforts to combat organized retail crime, which has been a problem in many downtowns. And last, but definitely not least, is housing. And looking at housing all kind of across the spectrum, from supporting programs to address homelessness, to provide tax incentives to help more housing, including the missing middle, folks who are not eligible for federal assistance, but usually can't afford market rate, and also making it easier for states and cities to coordinate all the services that go in helping the unhoused. For example, right now, there's a lot of Medicaid money that can't be used in any way that really helps, in some cases, people who are unhoused. And there's a real connection between, as we know, mental health, substance use, and homelessness. And we're trying to make sure that federal funding can really be used in a collaborative way, in a holistic way to support people who do that. And so that's what we're working on. And we're also, really working and engaging with all of our members and our members' to help really make the case in Washington, even in this challenging time, that there are opportunities and a need to really support downtowns. And so we're doing a few things at IDA. One is, we're asking all of our members and their members to let us know if there are things that happen, funding freezes or gaps or changes because of some of these very rapid fire policy changes. Let us know about them. That helps us understand where the challenges are, what we can do. In many cases, some of the real challenges in getting funding are happening kind of deep down in federal agencies in ways that we don't always hear about. Sometimes folks on the ground are the ones who know about it the most. Second of all, we started last year an advocacy network for all of our US members to join to help us become more engaged, share intel, and get our members active and in pushing to engage with policymakers at the federal level in support of downtowns. And of course, we have coming up our annual fly-in where members of IDEA come to Washington to directly engage with policymakers and make the case. So like I said, it is a challenging time and an uncertain time. A lot's happening. We are tracking all of it. And despite some of the chaos and everything else, we do think there are opportunities to advance good policy at both the congressional side and the agency side that benefit downtowns. It's going to take work, it takes effort and collaboration, but with that, we think we can do that. So while things seem kind of chaotic, or in fact are very chaotic, we also are really looking to say, how can we best make sure that we are advancing the interests and the need of downtowns and to get through kind of what is a challenging time. And with that, I thank you. Like I said, I'm happy to take any questions that folks have on anything. I might not know the answer, but I'm more than happy to take questions. And again, just want to thank you so much for having me this morning.
Well, Andrew Goldberg, thank you very much for your excellent work that you and the team at IDA are doing to stay on top of these important issues. We're going to open it up to question and answer from the audience. If you do have a question, please submit that at the bottom bar in either the Q&A or the chat, and we'll ask those questions. We also, right now, we're going to bring back in Beth Weirk and Matt Dorner from Milwaukee downtown. I just have a question for all of us. I'll answer for Madison. So a question for myself is how directly, we just talked about how federal policy affects downtowns across the country. Matt, Beth, how does federal policy directly affect the work that you're doing in Milwaukee downtown?
I'm happy to go first, but of course, I immediately think about transportation and infrastructure funding that we have received from the federal level. And, for us, always having those infrastructure projects that are underway and being studied and that are shovel ready, and what are those implications for us as we are in this sort of holding place, if you will, as it relates to receiving any kind of funding for those kinds of investments. And, for us, that's really important because our built environment is so important. Andrew really spoke to some things that touched with me. I think, as you know very well, Jason, Milwaukee is so proud that we have been named the #1 city in the United States for having the lowest per capita unsheltered population. And that comes with significant investment and significant work. And our organization leads a lot of that work, utilizing the Housing First model, focusing on holistic care and providing services as it relates to mental health, substance use or abuse, if you will, and housing. So, just in those couple of things there, and, I'm sure Matt can speak to, we've been working on this legislation that goes back to the prior administration around trying to get support for housing tax credits as we're coming out of COVID for some of these conversions to be able to do something immediately that would be effective and eliminate the underutilization of some of these commercial office spaces. You certainly don't want them to lay dormant and turn into a blighted nuisance, right? But so many things, and I think we're all just holding our breath. And Andrew, thank you for that phenomenal summary. And we sit here, and I used to say every day I wonder what's going to happen, and now I feel like it's every minute. So I'm sure Matt can, pile on as it relates to economic stimulus and housing as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So to build on that, Beth, I think, that's a great summary. And, this is probably a question for Andrew. And even as we're, sitting here and watching so the news feed come in, there's different, Trump policies and this different things that are coming in through the business journal this morning already. But I was wondering, I think really quickly, what was under the Biden administration, the raise grants. I know Milwaukee has several of those that, executed contracts And then I think now it's been transformed to the build grants, and it sounds like the funding for those have been slashed. I'm not really sure. It's tough to tell. Are these projects still, again, they were shovel ready to go, design beginning? Where do those essentially stand? I'm not sure if there's any input or any, understanding exactly where they're going. And like Beth, you mentioned also, been watching closely the office conversion tax credit. I'm not sure if that's something that's still on the agenda or really where a couple of those projects and programs stand.
So, yeah, thank you for the question. I say that really is kind of the key question why it's so important for us to get data from on the ground. Because some cases we don't know. So a lot of the transportation grants and things like that were initially frozen or intended to be frozen back in late January. Again, court order said that they needed to be unfrozen. Obviously, states and state DOTs and others have been very loud, let's say, about getting that money unblocked, and a lot of it has, but not necessarily all of it. And sometimes the reasons can be somewhat opaque. And so hearing like what funding, if you're hearing about programs that have been blocked, it's helpful to us. The other thing that's happening is you have this DOGE effort, which is going into agencies, and in some cases sort of unilaterally saying, well, don't do this, don't do that. So that's causing uncertainty. And of course, you have the workforce, which they're both cutting back the workforce, and also what we're finding is that there are a lot of federal employees right now who are really afraid to kind of move forward on things because frankly they don't want to get fired. So they're finding reasons in some cases to not move forward on projects, and so it's going to take in fact it's going to take the courts in some ways to sort this out. What we're seeing is while on the Hill, I mean, Democrats of course are criticizing this and raising concerns. I mean, as you'd expect them to do, but they don't have a lot of power. Let's be frank; they're in the minority. But you're seeing more and more Republicans, even maybe not always publicly, but in private, reaching out to the White House or to agencies and saying, "Hey, you got to get this done." Big example doesn't affect downtowns is in the early days of DOGE, they basically eviscerated USAID, the foreign aid. Well, a lot of the money went towards U.S. farmers, provided food for going overseas. A lot of that food was now sitting wasted in warehouses. Farmers aren't getting their payments. Not surprisingly, many of those farmers are in red states, and so they are reaching out to their Republicans. So it is what I would say, and I'm being frank here, is kind of a very confusing or situation, and a lot of the decisions being made are not across the board, but affect this region or this section, or depending on which person, which office is. So that's why hearing from the ground what the actual impact is kind of backwards. Usually we like to be in DC and say, this is the guidance we're getting and what will happen. We now it's inverse. We kind of need to hear from you because it's not always clear. On the office convergence piece, like the bill that I mentioned, the revitalizing downtowns and main streets, that's the bill that would provide this tax credit for converting unused office space into conversions. The good news is that bill has bipartisan support. It's going to be reintroduced fairly soon. We are hopeful, but not 100% confident, certainly, that it will be part of this big tax package that's happening this year, because there's a lot of competition to get provisions in there. So we're working hard with our allies across the real estate community and others to get that done. Like I said, it has bipartisan support, which is helpful, which is very good. But there's also a lot of other things on the agenda, the plate. So we need to kind of do everything we can to kind of move that forward. So yeah, so I like to give the answer saying if this is what's happening. In some cases, it's a little fuzzy, frankly, and uncertain.
Obviously, ramifications to Madison as well. And I want to, double down on what Beth talked about infrastructure. And in Madison, we have a couple of major infrastructure projects that will require significant federal funding or federal approval to move forward, namely the second line, the north-south line of our bus rapid transit, right? The east-west line has been created, and they're planning right now for the north-south line. Everything was moving forward nicely, but certainly uncertain times with that project. And also a project that affects both of us, and a topic that we've discussed several times on this series, the Madison Milwaukee Downtown Exchange, is the rail connection between Milwaukee and Madison. Certainly the extension of the Hiawatha, we're bullish on it. We really think it's great, but uncertain really with what the president and this Congress will think about rail transit. And then I think also important to Milwaukee, but certainly very important to Madison, is university research funding. Right, this is massive massive for UW, but certainly also for Marquette, for UWM, for all the colleges that are in Milwaukee. But UW is one of the leading research institutions in the world. And a lot of that research is federal funded. And I know it's uncertain times at the university about how to move forward with that as well. One question we do have from the audience here is under opportunities, you listed affordable housing, Andrew, being a priority. Are you saying that this administration has expressed an interest in affordable housing? This person hadn't heard that before. Is there any indication that they're acting on that priority?
Yeah, I mean, they've expressed interest generally. I think during the campaign, you heard about that, the idea of more affordable housing. I'll be honest, we have not heard a lot yet in terms of any action they're taking. I think even there, I think there's a broad agreement that housing is expensive, and that we need to do more to create more housing. I think what there still are some big partisan ideological differences on the Republican side. I think the focus is more on getting rid of some of the regulations that perhaps home builders and others you argue gets in the way of building housing. On the Democratic side, it's more about we need to invest in programs and such that provide more of that kind of housing. So I think, like I said, there's opportunity there because I think there is both sides acknowledge we have a housing shortage. That's a reality, and it's something people feel. I think that was actually one of the sleeper issues in the election, the fact that people feel they can't afford the housing they want to have, and young people can't move out of the house. That's personal for me because I have a college graduate who's in the house and I want her to move out. But it is an issue for a lot of people. So I think there are opportunities there, but yeah, I think the question is what will happen. Hopefully we'll see action in the congressional side. To be fair and honest, I've not seen heard a lot yet from the administration on that, but certainly through Congress, we want to push what we can there to kind of improve the situation.
The question I have for Matt and for Beth, and we're certainly seeing this with our membership in Madison, significant amount of nonprofits as members and entities that work directly that do receive federal funding. How are you sort of working with those partners that are honestly so vital to the work of downtowns? Beth,
Yeah.
Matt, this is a big issue.
It's a huge issue. Jason, I had a meeting yesterday already where, and I won't name the organization because I just won't, but implications around grants and funding for startups, for support of entrepreneurs, federal grants. And to me, again, that goes back to economic stimulus in our communities. This happens to be a statewide organization that is concerned because they're pumping the brakes in terms of providing financial support to some of these startup companies and even are questioning some of the ability to fund some of these staff positions where there have been some federal funds available to do that. And, spending a lot of time and effort and energy of stripping websites from anything relative to DEI. So a lot of effort and energy. In another meeting yesterday, we learned about 12 positions across the street from our office, federal positions in HUD that are being eliminated. And you can't help as a downtown person to automatically begin, first of all, some of these people are people that we know and work with, which, of course, the implications to them and to their families, the implications to what that means to our citizens who are losing these family sustaining jobs, the implications to what that means to these jobs that are in office spaces in the hearts of our downtowns and our Main Street communities. And I can't help but think, a decade ago when GSA had the Good Neighbor program, and it was very focused on having heavy, heavy engagement in the hearts of our cities because they recognized the importance of the economic stimulus that our cities created, not only for their downtowns, but for the cities, for the counties, for the regions, and therefore the states. And so you can't help but wonder about the ripple effect of some of that, personally, but then also from an economic perspective and what the long-term implications are. I mean, these people are just their jobs are done. That's it. Like that. Hard to not take that personally. Same
It
thing,
is just
same thing with the veterans, VA jobs. We're seeing it here, 2 miles west of downtown. So um it feels unsettling and we all want to hope that things are going to even themselves out. I will say this, I think we are all in support of eliminating any kind of waste or any kind of fraudulent spending. I think we, as hardworking, honest American citizens, are all in alignment with that. But I do, it's a little painful right now, admittedly.
No question. I mean, this has real effects. Matt, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I think earlier, Beth, that was a perfect summary just based on a couple meetings yesterday. But I think even earlier this week, it was announced, I think U.S. Forestry and Parks, there were several, kind of massive layoffs, like of a division here that's in downtown Milwaukee office. So again, the implications of, some of these, again, family supporting jobs, just kind of the rug being pulled out from underneath them. So again, it's, a very interesting, situation and sad when you start thinking about those individuals in particular.
Interesting question from the audience. Will regional collaboration between Madison and Milwaukee better position us as the region for federal funding during this administration? And the second question to that is any advice on what the top 2 or 3 issues the current administration is prioritizing that potentially we should be aligning on as the region? Andrew, Matt, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take a first crack at that. Yeah, I mean, I think generally anytime regional cooperation is helpful and better. I mean, the more you can speak with one voice, whether it's to the Hill, to the senators, especially because they're statewide, or to even agencies, I think that's beneficial. Like I said, this is an uncertain time because a lot of folks in the agencies are a bit paralyzed right now. They're not sure what to do. They're not sure if their jobs are safe. And so that's challenging, I think. But I think really being able to express to the congressional delegation, um, that importance of how a lot of the projects you talked about, whether it's the rail, the roads, the infrastructure, all these pieces really support regional economic development, job creation, and growth. I think that's an important message. And that you have to kind of keep hammering that, not just and then of course not just at the federal level, obviously at state level as well. And I know you do that as well. The results may take a little while, but it's I mean that's really it's very important in terms of the biggest priorities or opportunities. Again, we're trying to look through that. We think public safety, there could be opportunities there. We're looking at legislation that would really support doing more to help address public safety issues in downtowns. There's legislation we're working on here, which we think may have bipartisan support. Hopefully, will get introduced into Congress fairly soon that could do that. There is bipartisan legislation about kind of retail theft and things like that. We can do that. It's look, but I think at the end of the day, no matter where you are in government, generally speaking, the argument about economic development and growth and job creation is a good one. And so trying to find ways to kind of get that point across. And to be clear, there's probably a perception that, okay, well, cities are all blue state or Democratic and not. But I think a lot of the issues that there are opportunities on both sides of the aisle. And I think my hope certainly is that a lot of this chaos it has to some point settle down or work its way through the system, and we'll be able to get to a point where there could be kind of thoughtful, more serious policy making. That's my hope. I can't guarantee that. That's my hope, and that creates opportunities then to kind of go in and talk about how some of these programs and ways to help generate economic opportunity and create better, more beautiful cities. There'll be a place for that, but it's a little tricky right now, and we get that, but we have to work through this kind of difficult time.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. I will chime in as well. And I think we are all so grateful for any efforts that help address crime and safety in our urban centers. So super, grateful for any help and assistance and lift we get from that. I also think just something to remember, and I say this with all hopefulness, is that when I look at Madison and I look at Milwaukee, none of us are afraid of the hard work, and we have all been very focused on work locally and working with our local policymakers, working with our local governments, working with our other local community organizations in terms of saying we're just going to own this. And I think for all of us to remember, we've got to start the work and keep doing the work that we're doing already in our own backyard and building alliances and taking care of ourselves. And what I love about our partnerships regionally with Madison, is that we all learn from each other. We all help with the lift. We have great partnerships. We have great collaborations. We are all going to get through this. I know we will. This is a very transitional time for us, but I do feel hopeful, and I do believe because we are so self-reliant, we're going to find a pathway forward, and our communities are going to continue to be strong, and we're going to continue to provide that economic stimulus, and we will find a pathway forward. For maybe some things, we're going to have to push the hold button for a while, but we'll persevere and we'll dig deep, and we're going to see our way forward through this. So I don't mean to in any way or shape or form not sound hopeful about the future of Milwaukee and Madison, because I think we have an enormously bright future ahead of us.
Well, Beth, I think that's a wonderful way to end. Certainly, there is a lot of uncertainty, but we hope that hope wins out, and guaranteed that we will partner as much as we can with our friends in Milwaukee downtown to prioritize these regional collaborations, these issues. The question we had just a second ago about regional collaboration and its importance. I will note that was an anonymous question, and there was a third part to the question that I didn't answer, and it said they really liked Matt Dorner's shirt. So there we go. There we go. Matt, take that for what you want. I like the shirt too, very much. I also really enjoy the partnership between our friends in Milwaukee downtown and DMI here in Madison. We're going to produce 4 more of these events this year. We're working on the schedule now, so please look out on the calendars for other events coming in the future. Matt, Beth, any last words?
Well, thank you very much for wherever the comment came in on the shirt. I really enjoyed it as well. So, but yeah, I think, again, thank you, Jason. The series has been amazing. Thank you. And looking forward to a really great slate of events coming up. Andrew, thank you for the insight. We're obviously staying close. And, as Beth had mentioned, there's so much great that's happening in both of our communities across all different industry sectors, whether it be doubling down on downtown from Northwestern Mutual, on the office sector, a really great momentum, new housing being built, our cultural institutions investing in and then continue to reinvest and build vibrant downtown. So again, great projects in the public realm as well. So again, our downtowns will continue to coalesce. We'll work hard. We'll pivot as we have to. But again, really great momentum to continue to build on. So it's really a hopeful year, and really going to be a monumental year, and continue to build on our competitive advantages.
Well, and Jason, I would be remiss. Shop local, support our local businesses. Taste and Toast, February 24th through the 28th. TasteToastMKE.com. Come support our local businesses. All our friends from Madison can stay at Matt's house. It'll be lots of fun. Thank you, Andrew. You did a great job, and really so grateful for all of your advocacy on behalf of all the downtowns across the country and the work that you're doing with IDA. And Jason, thanks for your leadership.
Well, absolutely. I'm staying at
Thank you.
Matt's house. I love it. You're running a hotel now. Thank you all for joining us for our first Madison Milwaukee Downtown Exchange of the Year. And a huge thank you again, just as Beth said, to Andrew Goldberg with Agora and International Downtown Association for providing a lot of light on what is going. We hope we all see you downtown. Let's see you in Milwaukee for this great event. Let's see you in Madison. Shop local, eat local, entertain yourselves locally, do whatever you can locally. It is what you can do right now. You can control what you do locally, and that is super important. So support downtowns. Thank you all, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend. See you soon.